All right, Dogate, Andrew Ecker, Yinishe, Adona E Nishinigi E Inde Nishe, Irish Bashichin, Inde Dashache, German Dasha, Nalia Kote, Go E Tashli E, Portland, Oregon, Inasha, Shama E, Kathy Lindsay Woye, Shaza E, Dale Ecker Wole. So I am Andrew Ecker, my mother, Kathy Lindsay, my father, Dale Ecker, my mother's mother, Elva Gallegos, Apache woman from New Mexico, my father's mother, Evelyn Beatty, Irish woman from Pennsylvania, my mother's father, Leroy Lindsay, Apache man from Arkansas, my father's father, Wayne Ecker, German Algonquin from Pennsylvania. I have a daughter, Bailey, son, Peyton, beautiful, beloved fiance, Monica. I was born into this body in the land of the Multnomah in the Clackamas in Portland, Oregon, although I reside here in the land of the Akmel Atom, the Peeposh, the Maricopa in Phoenix, Arizona. So I'm really grateful today. I have a friend of mine here, a new friend of mine that I met through a mutual friend, the certified health nut, shout out to Troy Casey. And I wanted to explore, we have a little, a bit of similar kind of backgrounds in a certain sense of overcoming some issues, issues that many of us face, especially in this pandemic era, the issues of substance abuse and really navigating mental health, right? I know our listeners are here because we touch on self-identity, relational spirituality, and emotional intelligence. And I want to turn it over to Nathan and have him introduce himself to you and share a little bit from his heart about how he views wellness, how he views optimal living. Yeah, Nathan, what's going on, man?
Thank you so much, brother. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. It's a privilege. Sending you so many blessings and so much love to you and your family, your loved ones during this new year that we are finding ourselves leaping into, I feel like.
Feel
And
that
yeah,
too.
just jumping right into it. Just jumping right into it. So, I refer to myself as a lifestyle optimization transformation coach. And I say that because we are not linear creatures. This is not a linear lifetime. We are multifaceted, multidimensional, multi, you know, completely multidimensional creatures when we start looking at things from so many different layers and so many different angles and so many different directions and degrees that allow us to be free. So, looking at health and wellness, at least just from my upbringing, I always saw health and wellness as fitness. And I was introduced into fitness in 2011 on my 19th birthday. It was the first time I stepped into a gym. I would say is the most conventional way I learned about it. Being an athlete for the majority of my life, started martial arts at 5 years old, dabbled in football, wrestling, baseball, tons of sports, different activities. Stepping into the fitness realm was something that I felt comfortable and called to. It was also the one thing that I feel as though transitioned me from my unhealthy addictions into a more healthier addiction. And just to be clear, the addiction is simply just a pattern that we're seeking in order to feel good,
I like
which
that.
we'll get into later, right? Which we'll
Hmm.
get into later because that's a huge and potent component of my journey, just in terms of optimizing, redefining, transforming my life from within, and being able to help and guide others through this same process of mine. So going into fitness, I was handed down these conditions, these systems, these beliefs from other people. And it became very much surrounded around aesthetics. How I looked was therefore my worth. And I would eat, the 6 times a day, all the food, same meals every single day. And over time, my body started transforming, right? Externally. But internally, I still felt miserable, absolutely miserable. And it wasn't until I sustained a very traumatic hand injury with my dominant hand, nonetheless, in March 2017, when I tore my hand open. And it was exposed to me very quickly, very abruptly, quite vigorously, that health is not just what we do with our body. It's in our mind. And someone who has struggled with mental health the majority of my life, contemplating suicide at an early age of 7 to 8 years old, and moving through addiction and going through depression and all these things that the military gave me, that I took on as an identity, whether it had been, quote unquote, intermittent explosive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder or major depressive disorder or post traumatic stress disorder. I really allowed these mental health disorders to really become a part of me. And when I
Mm.
didn't have training, when I didn't have fitness, when I didn't have movement, what it started turning into was how do I become healthy now? What does that mean to me? And I didn't know. I didn't know. And I fell into my final stage where I contemplated suicide for the last time, when I collapsed on my ground crying because I couldn't even brush my teeth. Being 253 pounds and a professional bodybuilder and feeling as though my life was over, what else do I have? Right? What does health mean? What does life mean? What does wealth mean? And I was introduced into the transformational training, into the experiential training, where we, call it and label it as personal development now. We start calling it and labeling it, transformative learning or whatever the case may be. And it became very apparent to me very quickly that my mind was not healthy. My heart was not healthy. And after being in psychotherapy now with the 21 years of experience sitting on the couch and talking to somebody about how I feel, I never felt complete. I never felt quote unquote healed. I didn't feel as though anything actually shifted within me. I feel as though I just came to accept all those things that were a part of my life for so long. So after my injury, I started really digging into how to heal the body, because I started healing myself internally. And I started finding different tools and techniques and modalities that I could use to enhance my overall physical well-being. And through that process, I was able to further develop a relationship with my body. But more importantly, I started becoming more aware, not only where my body was at in time and space, but where were my thoughts while my body was moving through time and space? How was my energy in motion? How was that correlated to the emotions in which I was feeling? How was I carrying my body and implementing into my movements the way I was feeling? And was that a way of elevating myself or suppressing myself? And I started developing this hyper awareness around how is it that I'm feeling and what do I need right now in this present moment? So transitioning, from the bodybuilder, power lifter type style of exercise, I started finding mobility, movement, flow, stability, durability, trying to find ways to optimally condition the body in the ways in which I could go out in the world and do anything I wanted to without the fear of being limited, in order to seek freedom, which is what I've always been seeking my entire life. And when I found the ability to freely move my body, I found the ability to freely control my mind. Where was my time at in space, right? How could I start naming these emotions? How could I start working through these emotions and translating them, transmuting them in more healthy and secure behaviors? Rather than reaching for the tinfoil and the heroin, how can I start reaching for the tool in which I need in this present moment to feel good that actually optimizes my health? Instead of smoking out of a straw, how can I pull this air into my body using my lips as the straw? How can I bring that in? How can I bring that in? How can I start taking these old patterns that are no longer serving me and replacing them with patterns that allow me to step into my highest potential? And then without psychoanalyzing myself in the process, truly honoring myself in the process, appreciating myself in the process, loving myself and having compassion for myself in the process. And that's exactly what I do for others now, is I help them find that way. And this is a conversation we had before where if we have an addict, right? If you are addicted, if you are seeking help, if you are going to rehab or the 12-step program or anything else, everything does have its purpose. But is it an individualized roadmap to recovery? Not quite often. Quite often, there's already a preset template in which you're given, and then therefore you have to go through the pain and the agony, the suffering, the trials and the trepidations and the errors to find that, wow, this thing has gaps. And how do we fill those gaps? That's how we create an individualized process for somebody to discover their true potential. Mm-hmm. And be able to incorporate that methodology into health, into wellness, into the mind, into the body, the heart, and the divine allows somebody to change, transform, redefine, and optimize from the within, inside out. And that's my mission.
I love it. I love it. So many things come forward when I'm listening to you. And, one of the practices that I've had in my own life is this kind of continual cycle of connecting to the density of energy that's stored within my body. And I feel that there are vast relationships that we have in our individual process of how we connect to that density. In my practice and working with people that are in high performance, there definitely is this idea of continual linear practice. I'm getting to my next goal, and then what's my goal after that, and then it's like this total distortion of the balance of the masculine, almost like the masculine is there, you know, pushing us in that direction. Once we reach that goal, we find out that, oh, you know, how do I really accept and celebrate that process and really stay in that moment of enjoying myself? And most of us, what we do is we just create another goal, another get to. So as I'm listening to you, it's the memory that comes forward of the cycles of how I really live in responsibility with my medicine, whether that be the density of my own suffering inside of myself, my relationship to my mental health, my relationship to how addiction shows up in my life, all of these things. And that kind of concept is something that as men, we really we have to practice it. You know, we have to practice that place of looking at the cycles of our emotions, looking at the process of really stepping into our emotional intelligence. And that is that ultimate sovereignty in my mind, of how we come into that place of being free, quote unquote, free from the captivity of our own limitations. Um, you know, this is language that I feel really it's important for us to get this out here, because this is the language that really conceptualizes transformation in a way that is, you know, biomimicry. It's like we're like taking the cycles of the earth, we're taking the cycles of the planet, and we are coming back to that place of being an earthling again. You know, us as individuals that are living this idea of optimal living, to discount ourselves from the earth, to discount ourselves from the cycles, is really to live in limitations and to actually be in a place in which we're setting ourselves up for disappointment. So, in your experience, because I know that you have a really strong regimen of fitness in your life, are there times where you're maybe, you know, doing a movement and that movement will bring your mind into a feeling of maybe, you know, a time in your past when you were struggling with your relationship to mental illness, a time in your past when you were struggling with addiction? And how does that relate to us in the way that we accept, right, our individual process? You know, our the acceptance of what I would call in kind of my language base, our medicine. You know, I know that for me, when I would go into those places, sometimes, you know, it was a trigger and would lead me back to substance or dysfunctional behavior. How is it in you accessing that density in your own life? What are the practices that you do in order to acknowledge what the body is telling you as you're doing a movement and your mind is thinking about, you know, something that went on in the military or something that went on in your addiction or, you know, in the multiple different facets of you as a person? How do you process that in a way that brings about optimization and transformation?
Right. Beautiful question. That is a beautiful question. And, you know, when you say, you know, what does that bring up from the past? You know, when you were going through the addiction or going through this experience, like, you know, I never really dove into flashbacks. It never really happened for me. But what happened is the thought, it was the mind, it was me trying to do something. And whether it's pulling this weight one more time, whether it's, you know, moving and slowing down my movement and then the way I articulate myself through time and space, it's within that moment between that thought and that action, which really determines it. Right. Because if I was going through a very traumatic experience, if I was angry, very angry back in the day, and let's say I wanted to go out and fight somebody, right? The thought of being angry, the feeling of being angry, wanting to fight, the agency in between was actually where my addiction lie, right? That's where it was. So to answer that more clearly, what would happen is, and I'll give you a deadlift as an easy explanation, right? So when I'm looking at this weight, 400 to 500 pounds, which I can still pull now because of this, is I'm looking at it and say, I want to lift this. Right. Now, between that moment and the moment in which I grab the bar and I pull it up to my waist, there has to be something. Right. And I'm going to notice that my mind is going to wander. My mind is seeking, well, what if this guy's watching me over here? What if that woman over there is watching from here? Right. How do I need to show up in order to impress them? Right.
Mm,
Rather
yeah.
than what do I need in this moment to build my strength, my inner fortitude to push through whatever pain I'm about to experience. That's where it really lies for me. And I apply that from my deadlift to my animal flow practice, to my steel mace practice, to kettlebell training, anything in which I see a challenge that is going to require more mental fortitude than I'm normally used to is going to bring a level of awareness. So now my subconscious is starting to wire why it is I'm doing what I'm doing. So coming back to the true essence, the true lover archetype within me is where I have to find that agency in between.
Oh, it's beautiful. So I have this kind of idea of the way that our emotions become a part of our reality. So I remember in my past, like the very moment that addiction came into my life, and this was my mom. She was involved in some crime. We had been shoplifting, and I grew up in a home. Both my parents were addicted to drugs, so my mom would repeatedly take me out to steal with her as a little boy. She decides to leave me at the park with a bucket of chicken. Right? She had taken me to a lot of dope houses when I was a kid, but for whatever reason, this was a place that she couldn't take me. She was afraid to take me. So she leaves me at the park in Northeast Portland with a bucket of chicken. And I'm like sitting there eating this chicken as my mom drives away. And that for me, right, was the moment that I traded a substance for a relationship. And that substance being food. And I really came to a place of realizing that that was the patterning, right? I didn't understand that I was in this relationship with source. I was in this relationship with the universe. So constantly people, places, things, substances. These were the replacement values of me being in a play in an imbalance inside of myself. So I would say the journey of coming to that place of discovering, okay, when was the first time that I kind of accepted or I downloaded that programming of addiction was actually a point in my emotional journey that allowed for me to realize, okay, what is the sovereignty in this situation? How can I bring myself back to that optimal state of being in myself and being in the trueness of Andrew and how I show up in the world? So, with the description of what you're talking about, it really took me to a visualization of that very first time where Nathan kind of began to accept this idea of performance and what that feels like to have the world's eyes on you. Many of us, especially in our contemporary culture, right, with Instagram and Facebook and social all over the place, it's like we want the eyes on us, and yet we kind of need to downshift into that space of realizing, am I doing this for me? Am I doing this for something that's going to benefit myself? So it's beautiful that you articulate the process of getting to that macro kind of perception of yourself, and that's a key for anyone that is seeking wellness. I would like for you to unpack, how do we get there? How do we make that choice of seeing the stimulus in our lives in a way that brings us to the macro point of view? And like, what are the tools that a person can allow for themselves to be in practice with? When was it that you started to know, that you're aware of the person over here, you're aware of this girl, you're aware of this guy, you're aware of all these things? Like, and how did you come to that honesty of saying, like, this is a part of my relationship to fitness?
Right. So there's two to three parts here that I want to unpack. And the first one being the perception of others, right?
Mm,
Having the perception of others growing up as an athlete, right? In martial arts specifically, right? I was always one-on-one combatant, right? How do I get myself to a place where I defeat this person, right? There was layers and layers and layers of competition. And me being the only one in that position, therefore I had to be the best, right? I had to be the best. And I distinctly remember a visualization that comes to mind in this experience is when my old instructors, right, my former instructors, Greg and Amy Medford, bless their hearts, I'm so grateful for their teachings. But they opened a new facility and they said, Nathan, we want you to perform the staff set, the bow staff set. And that was my thing. Like, that was my thing. And I was pumped. And the minute I got up there, I was holding the bow staff. And I remember the first words that come to mind is, I hope I don't fuck this up. just like any other performer, you know, in that state, in that place, that was the first moment in which I said, I'm not, and I'm going to choose not to do this. And that's really what brought this level of awareness that everybody's watching me, but it's my conscious choice of how I'm going to create this reality for myself in this moment. And if I keep on going down these cycles of just wanting to perpetuate pain, which was just handed down to me, living a life full of pain, it's all I knew. It's all I knew. Being abused at a very young age throughout my entire childhood, all I ever knew was pain. So when that translated into addiction, heroin, it was the only thing that took all the pain away. And I would notice when I'd get high is that I would just observe the room. I would always observe the room, but I was always skeptical, right? Because I was doing something bad. I was doing something that was against the rules. I was doing something illegal. I was doing something that really wasn't in alignment of my true essence. So I'd always be looking over my shoulder, right? Whether or not I was going to get jumped, whether or not I was going to get robbed, whether or not someone is going to come in the room, whether or not that girl over there is looking at me and she thinks I'm cute, right? This observation and perception of the world radically shifted for me. And I started again, not consciously doing these things. It was more subconsciously moving through life with these different experiences. And one thing that one of my former partners had told me is that Nathan, you have the ability to learn something and immediately integrate it without much of a thought, right? Because being an athlete, I've always been a very kinesthetic learner, an experiential learner, a very hands-on approach. So when these opportunities are presented to me, I've always had a very keen understanding of what in this moment is required from me in order to make this a success, a radical success. So the second part to unpack there is that moment. It's that right there. Once you can start observing if these things are coming in, if this person is looking at you, if the crowd is watching you, if, whatever is getting in the way of you actually performing, right? Just bringing it from the subconscious of what you're so used to into the conscious awareness of what is required from me in this present moment to fulfill my deepest desire. And how can I deepen my love for myself in the process? And a lot of people would say in fitness, it's just goal setting. It's get out of your head, get out of your head, get out of your head. But nobody ever teaches someone how to get out of your head. Just like people tell you in school, hey, you need to focus, you need to focus, you need to focus. But you're not taught how to focus in school. So what do these things mean? And that's where I like to say, it's just bringing things into your conscious awareness. It's doing things in your life that will work for you, where you have a moment to observe what thoughts come up. And how do you judge those thoughts? How do you shame those thoughts? How do you start to redefine those thoughts into more healthier, secure behaviors of what it means to be you, right? For me personally, breath work, right? When I'm in that breath hold and that breath lock, I'm going to see the thoughts that come up. Oh, I can't breathe. Oh, I'm going to die. Oh, I'm going to pass out, right? But knowing that I'm safe at the end of the day allows me to move through that difficulty, through that discomfort, and knowing, therefore, I'm always okay. And then in the ice bath, which a lot of people have experienced, my personal experience is I don't like this. I'm uncomfortable. It stings. My entire body is disarray. I can't breathe. I would be so much better if I just stopped doing this and I got out and I stayed comfortable. But then, therefore, if I did that, now I'm looking at other areas of my life and saying, well, that's why I'm not leaning into discomfort there. And that's not leaning into discomfort there. Knowing that those opportunities, those experiences provide me information to start applying new ways of being, right? And those are just some examples there. But it's just, again, becoming very hyper-awareness, and just not disregarding it, not ignoring it, not pushing it off to the side. And that is a very normal human three-dimensional thing to do, because of course we always want to seek comfort. That's why we seek things through addictions. We want to find things that feel good, but when we don't do things that feel good, we therefore feel resistance. But instead of falling away from the resistance, we need to start leaning into it, right? If we lean into that resistance, into that change, then we can start seeing new ways of being, because now we're developing a hyper awareness to it, and we're just implementing whatever individual practice is going to work for us. Not saying that meditation is this for this person, or an ice bath is good for this person, or breath work is for this person. Like, what in that moment do you need in order to perform the task at hand with purpose, power, and passion. What is going to make you happy?
I love that. It's for me, right, the idea of the process of how do we get into that state of flow or that state of optimization, that is the understanding of how we create the framework for, I didn't grow up where I was involved in sports much. I mean, I did have a little bit of sports background, but I have been a performer with music and played on some pretty big stages. And, in 2019, we did 587 wellness-based events where I'm performing in front of groups of people from anywhere from 500. And, still to this day, right, there's that feeling of what some would call nervousness. Even today, I did a program for a group of people in recovery, and I felt that sensation in my body. Now, what's happened is I have changed the neuroplasticity in my mind by conditioning my mind to say, oh, that's a feeling I feel before I do something great. And that whole like reframing of the conversation has been the loosening of the kind of the paralyzing feelings of, you know, forget it, I'm not going to do this, it's too much for me. These people don't understand me. They're not going to, all of the different parts of the monkey mind that come in. That has been a real, I've really had to curate that. I've really had to foster a relationship with the energy in my body in order to be the successful person that I am today, whether that's speaking in front of a group of people or doing a wellness-based program or some kind of facilitation, even going on social media at times. There are people out there that struggle with going on social media. They literally are paralyzed just to do a live video or to do, a podcast or anything like that. And for that person, right, what you're saying and the compliment that I'm giving, it's definitely, you can apply this to the principles of your life in so many facets. It's not just in high performance sports or in working out in the gym. It's whenever your body experiences resistance, channel that energy. Find something that you can do with it that is going to give you momentum and give you the power of directing yourself into that space in which you are able to create something, something that's beautiful for everyone. So thank you for taking us into that understanding of, how to loosen ourselves from that form of captivity that really is our own mind, that keeps us from living in that space of really stepping forward. So 2 questions for you before, I know you got to get off here soon. So, and these are, you can answer them as quick as possible. So how do you love yourself and how are you gentle with yourself?
Beautiful. So these are two things that I'm practicing now intently, very aggressively, actually, because for me, right, to love myself, it takes a lot of work, to be honest. Always being in a position where I've had to please others, serve others, give to others, yet keep myself safe at the same time. I've always been doing, looking over my shoulder, checking who's watching, just like in the gym, except now I was looking out for things or people that were going to hurt me. And now to truly love myself is to allow myself the time and the space to be alone, right? Being very codependent in nature for several years with many women in many relationships with many addictions, I had to start seeking things within me rather than outside of me. So sitting in a meditation, sitting and playing the handpan, sitting and taking a bath, right? Diving more into my femininity is actually the ways in which I love myself, because growing up, I was always seeking to be nurtured. So now the practice of loving myself is how can I nurture myself in these moments, whether it's eating a good meal, whether it's taking a bath, whether or not it's going to get a massage, whether it's just going to do a cold plunge or a hot tub or just something to unwind and release all my expectations and attachments to everything that's outside of me that no longer serves me. That is the primary way I can love myself now. And it's not a linear construct. There's no parameter. It's just it's just a place where I can develop a reference point in order to ask myself, what do I need in this present moment right now to be happy? right? And that is the ultimate key to loving myself is what do I need in this moment to be happy? What in this moment do I need to feel fulfilled? What in this moment do I need to feel nurtured and safe and soothed and secure? The three S's of human happiness. What are those things? What do they look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What feeling am I desiring? And how can I actually develop an access point to pull this in and give it to myself? And that's how I love myself. And now to be gentle with myself, this is actually my word for the year: compassion. Compassion,
Nice.
compassion, compassion. Because, one of my mentors had recently shared this with me, and I want to share it with you today, that compassion is transcendence, right? And compassion is the path to freedom and offers us an opportunity to deepen our love. Therefore, if I truly want to love myself, I have to practice compassion in order to deepen the capacity, my ability to love myself to the level in which I am seeking. Because when I'm finding compassion, when I'm in meditation, I could be there for a very long time. And even when I can't find that compassion, finding compassion in that moment is the practice of the ascended master. And if I am seeking ascension in this lifetime, compassion is the path to transcendence, in which, in order to be gentle with myself, I have to be compassionate towards myself
Mm.
in all moments, in all things, to know my own pain and to tell myself and ask myself why I need it.
Oh, I love it, man. Love it. So, how can people get connected with you if they're looking for guidance, if they're looking for a consultation? There's just so many areas. I know that you're a business person. You've been through developing your own, business, all of the different parts of you. How can they connect?
Yeah, so they can connect with me virtually on almost every social platform at Nathan Kohlerman, whether it be Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok. I just signed up for, what is the new one? Clubhouse. So I'll be on all social networks, and I'm getting a new website done, but I do have a website available now for people to see some of the work that I am doing. And that's www.neuintention.com. And it's NEU intention.com.
Sweet, man. Well, thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy day and connecting with us. And yeah, I look forward to Nathan part two as well. And get in
Yes,
here and
sir.
yeah. All right, man. Thanks.